Tonight you're hearing a report. You ask for the community to go out and gather this information, and tonight the PACT, the Planning a Course Together, facilitating team and leadership are presenting to you a report. I believe that report is in front of you, and as they go through, they will give you a variety of pieces of information, and if you're like me, you'll have to just sort of absorb them. But we have plenty of time. We've set this time aside so that you can hear the report. And with that, I would like to ask Mr. Lee Sawyer to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Smith, community members and staff, it's a sincere pleasure to be here with you this evening, along with other PACT chairs and leaders, as you just witnessed, and provide a summary report that's been, as we mentioned, over a year in the making. As we make our presentation, we would ask that you please save your questions to the end, and we'll have an opportunity to address those at that time. All right, on the board you can see that we have a chart, and this chart shows PACT's community engagement process. It starts in the upper left and proceeds to the bottom right, which is where we are tonight. Presenting recommendations to you. The agenda for our presentation tonight describes the elements of the process, starting with our charge, the makeup and the work of the facilitating team, the community engagement sessions, the topics we studied, the results of the community surveys, the extensive facility evaluation study, and finally, the development of our recommendations. We have summarized our charge as follows. In developing recommendations for a long-range plan, you said that we should determine current, accurate, and consistent information that reflects community perceptions and priorities, an understanding of the role, objectives, accomplishments, and needs of the district and the community, long-term goals in terms of student achievement, staff development, and compensation, facilities, resources, and other educational performance criteria. What steps need to be taken to accomplish those goals, and in terms of resources, programs, and operations. So what steps should be taken to establish long-term and meaningful ongoing two-way communication with the community? Now, you said that our recommendations should be presented to you by the end of the 2010-2011 school year, and we almost made it. Very close. Basically, the three main concepts in our charge were as follows: a long-range plan for improving the overall performance of the St. Joseph School District that is student-centered, instructionally sound, and research-based, and fiscally responsible. Steps to be taken to implement that plan, and development of an ongoing model for district community collaboration and communications. So in essence, you wanted the community to provide a roadmap, a guide to the future for St. Joseph School District. Okay, and really the second step in the process called for the identification and enlistment of community members to serve as chairpersons for the program. I've been fortunate to be one of those chairs and serve alongside the other chairs, Stacy Park, Lois, and Bill Hedge. We have been part of a 20-plus member team consisting of other community members, parents, staff, and board representatives. We absolutely want to praise, as we just did, but I want to reiterate the faithful and professional work of our internal coordinator, Sharice Geisbert. We needed a lot of things at times, and she was always there to help us and guide us and make sure that we had everything. So I would say, would you say it's fair to say that we were fairly needy at times, Sharice?
Oh, yeah.
Well, she did a great job. She really did, and we all realize that. And while I'm thanking people, I'd also like to acknowledge contributions of Zach Sneeflock for helping us with the PowerPoint, projection, and audio for each of the community sessions, and Kurt Ritchie for videotaping our sessions on those so the presentations could be available on our website and on the cable channel. They also helped us when we recorded PSAs and videos that we did, so there was a lot of work that went into that. Also, thanks to the St. Joseph School District print shop for copying all of our materials for each meeting. Mark Colgan and the maintenance crew, as well as the maintenance staff at the high schools. After our community engagement sessions, there was quite a flurry of activity in and out of those buildings, and I was always impressed that the maintenance crews were very patient as we kind of spent time getting ourselves wrapped up and out of there. They did a great job. Debbie Consolver and Marjorie Woodhull and the ROTC the ROTC programs that assisted in directing participants. They were always available for us at the doors and pointing people to the right spots. Now you can see up on the board this facilitating team, and I just wanted to tell you that I think we all feel really grateful that we had such a good group. And as Melody mentioned about Mr. Shank, you know, most everybody was at most all meetings, some at all meetings. And what I was very appreciative of is when we had discussions and we critiqued things and looked at and tried to make sure that we were making a clear message at our community engagement sessions and those kinds of things, this group of people did a very good job of giving their opinions. We have people from different parts around of the community, geographically, as well as different interests and different things that they do and different perspectives. So what I think was really outstanding is that we had people that were willing to share their opinions and came from different backgrounds, diverse viewpoints, and so it really helped us when we tried to boil this down and tried to make it all work together. So I really want to thank that group for their dedication and effort and their opinions. Those are important. As our team came together for the 18 formal 2-hour meetings to discuss and guide the PACT program, not to mention the time and energy those individual members spent in the activities, we decided what we needed to determine is, you know, for each meeting is, you know, the syllabus and preview and critique these CES presentations, which I touched on, create the work activity so that we could get good participation at those meetings, and assist and facilitate the CES. We would review verbatim the executive summary documents at each of our meetings. And one of the first team building exercises was develop ideas and concepts for a name and logo, which obviously you've seen a lot of over the last 18 months. And what we were trying to do is accomplish, you know, in this community engagement effort. We had a lot of discussion, and after collaboration, we settled on this as our name and logo. And we felt strongly that we needed to reflect the fact that as a community, we were all in this together. Thus, planning a course together, it conveys that we are making a pact with each other to make decisions to move our district forward. This is also symbolized by the rising sun, indicating that as a result of our work, there should be a brighter day and a time ahead for our school district and the community. You have seen this logo on all of our materials and websites and all that kind of stuff, so we've been proud of that. And here are just the next slide just shows some of the many vehicles that we used to try to get the word out and try to reach out to the community. We have tried about every way possible to invite, encourage, and maybe even at times beg our community members to participate at some level in the program. We are very appreciative of the media attention and coverage given to the project. You can see we did letters, postcards, flyers. We did press releases, media stories, newspaper power notes, television PSAs. We had the Saturday meetings where we had people come in and we just had what we called coffee and conversation. The next slide shows even some more things that we tried. Obviously the website. John Hickman helped us with the email blast that we would send out as we kind of continue to build our database of emails. School marquees. One of the many Sharice projects was to record our district alert system messages, which she did a lot of, and so we know that families were getting those over the telephone prior to our meetings. Chamber of Commerce, word of mouth. So there's a lot of different things, and we spent a lot of time sort of brainstorming on how we could reach out and how we could reach more people. All right. We're particularly proud of our Special PACT website that we've referenced, produced and managed by John Hickman, one of our facilitating team members. From promotions to documentation to social networking, the PACT website has been and continues to be a major and vital part of our PACT program. I will spend more time a little later in this presentation focusing on the material that is on the site. We were able to use video on the website to help promote PACT. Special programming, like this is an example of a video that we produced by Dr. Franklin Hill, specifically for promoting the presentation at a CES that he spoke at. And so, just in concluding my remarks, I'd like to again thank all the people that made this possible and put all the effort into this, that could at least bring us to this point tonight to make this presentation to you. We appreciate that opportunity. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Stacy Park. Stacy.
As mentioned earlier, we have been very fortunate that the St. Joseph media has seen the PACT program as an important force in our community, and for the past year has made it a priority to provide coverage of the PACT effort. It is important to note that as a result of media coverage, the website, and other communication vehicles, our community has had the opportunity to be informed and in touch with the PACT program, even if they were not able to attend the meetings. Now to the community engagement sessions. There were 12 of them. Each session was actually a community workshop that included delivery of information on a specific topic and then true two-way dialogue in a small group setting. Consensus decisions made at each session became important building blocks leading to our eventual recommendations. During the program, we had 936 people attend one or more of the engagement sessions and an average attendance of 176. And one of our sessions had an attendance of approximately 500. Here is our calendar of the community engagement sessions, and sometimes we refer to them as a CES, and the topics addressed in each session. After 3 facilitating team meetings, we launched the PACT CES with our first session on March 27th, 2010. And early in the program, we experimented with having a weekday evening session and then repeating it on a Saturday morning. And so you'll see the dates, March 27th and March 30th there. At our first session, we asked participants what topics we needed to address during the duration of our program. That feedback helped us to develop a syllabus. The topics we would address as we proceeded with subsequent CES. Note that our early sessions addressed early childhood education and preschool services, technology, and finances. We held several sessions dealing with facilities, and we labeled these school planning 1, 2, 3, and 4, each having a specific emphasis. In these, we learned about components or ingredients that needed to be included in a facilities master plan and why a facilities master plan is important to a school district. We reviewed a process and commented on the tool or instrument that could be used in evaluating each of our buildings. We discussed school size and grade configuration, as well as educational trends being implemented in effective schools. We concluded our 2010 sessions with a summary from our architects outlining the process that would be used in evaluating all our school facilities. We are grateful to the Board of Education for exercising the foresight in contracting with BLDD and local St. Joseph architects to conduct a professional facility evaluation study leading to a facility master plan for St. Joseph School District. So early this year, much of our focus and attention was on the facility evaluation study. To encourage community members to participate in the study, we decided not to have a CES in January. From January through March 2011, there were 2 meetings at each school. This was a total of 54 meetings. Architects and facility experts facilitated the meetings. They included a tour of the building and completing a detailed evaluation grid sheet covering key issues and categories, everything from safety and security to adequacy for instruction. Parents and community members were invited and encouraged to attend. In February, we began reconvening our monthly community engagement sessions, and the February session focused on quality staffing. In March, we heard a summary report of the findings of the facility evaluation study and the next steps that would be used in moving forward to create a draft facilities master plan. We also heard the results of a professional community survey that had been commissioned by the Board of Education. This began to give us some quantitative data to go with the qualitative information that we were receiving from our small group community engagement sessions. We realized that both types of data were important in strengthening our eventual recommendations. In April, we received and reviewed the first draft of the facility master plan and the statements of recommendation. At our last CES on May 24th, we took another look at the second draft of the facilities master plan and the statements of recommendation and received additional feedback and input from participants. As you will see later in our recommendations, the process of receiving community input and feedback on the plan and recommendations should not conclude with this report, but should continue during the next school year. We were tremendously fortunate to have lots of folks with professional expertise in each of our CES topics to give us specific data and information to consider. This data and information was the basis for our small group dialogue and decisions leading to our recommendations. We felt it was important to acknowledge and thank these individuals in our summary report. We said earlier we were particularly pleased with our PACT website. Sometimes in developing a report like this, a large paper document is prepared that contains all the backup and supporting material for the report. Because we recognize the value of technology and moving to a more paperless world, we decided that rather than including all the backup material in your notebook report, we would simply point you to our website for all these materials. At this time, I'd like to call on one of our facilitating team members, Mr. John Hickman, to remind you of all the information on the site and how it is organized. It is not only there for your reference, but for the entire community. And if we could give John a round of applause.
Thank you very much. I thought hopefully I can do this without messing too much up. I thought I'd take you through just a quick tour of the website so that you know what resources are available for you and where they're located, because this really is the repository of everything related to PACT from actually from when Melody and Sarah and Kevin Kirby started the study group that kind of came out of this, led to this process. When you go to the main screen, to the home page, you will find the fly-through videos that BLDD has prepared for us, and let's hope that the technology works here. So these are actually loaded into our YouTube channel, which I'll show you here in just a second. So there's both the Draft 1 and Draft 2, and there's also links to Facebook and to the Twitter page. On the survey results, I believe that you will find the documents that Unicom had presented to the board meeting a few months ago, and it takes us a second here to load, so I may not wait. But also then down here you get the full report. You get both the slideshow in PDF format and the full survey results, so you can plow through them for yourself. Under the community engagement sessions, this is probably the part that the community knows the most about. There's a brief description of what's involved in a community engagement session, as well as if you want to go back and see the dates that all of those were held and the locations where they were held. And then I'm going to take you down here to the very last one to give you an idea. There is a separate page for every single community engagement session that we had. On this page for that CES, you will find first the video of the entire presentation. So if you missed it or you want to go back and review it or whatever, it's right here for you to review. In addition, any other multimedia stuff that we have access to is also presented there. And then finally, two final pieces. There's a link to the photos that we've loaded out on Facebook so the community can see to the Facebook page. And additionally, from each CES, you will find 5 documents for each CES. First, you will find an executive summary. Second is the actual presentation that was presented at the CES. Third is the work activity that was completed at each table. And then the verbatim responses from that work activity. And you can download those individually, or the All Docs PDF is exactly what it sounds like, which is all of this stuff rolled up into one great big PDF if you want to download it and take it with you. So that goes back to what was presented, what work was done, what discussions were had, and then the documentation that then supports the conclusion of the executive summary. So you've got everything related to every CES right there to review. Additionally, another big part of what we did was the building evaluations, and so you can find the description that the public saw about the building evaluations. You can also go back and find the meeting dates, and as an editorial comment on the side while the next page is loading, I'll just tell you that the dates were put up and it was an unbelievably aggressive schedule to begin with. Then coupled on top of it, we had probably the worst winter of snowfall, and all the architects finished within 7 days of the original plan, which is pretty unbelievable to me. And then you're going to have all of the facilities findings, and you can find every single grade on every single item that was identified at every single school, so all 92 points that were evaluated at all 27, I think, buildings. The report's in there, and then it also breaks it down by school. So if you want to dig into the detail, all the details are there. There is no shortage of details on this website. Under the announcements button, you can find every single press release that was sent to the public, starting with the study group right after the passage of the last levy election in November of 2009. So everything that's been released to the public is there, and you simply you can scroll through, and at the bottom of the page, I'm going quickly, I know, but you can just keep hitting next and you'll roll backwards to all the press releases. And then of course we have our email sign up form that anybody from the community can come here, log in, and get added to the email newsletter. As I said earlier, we had 5,700 names on that list, and my rough estimate is we sent around 250,000 emails in the 16-month period. Then all the social media links, so we've got our own YouTube channel for the PACT for SJSD, and you can find the links here to that, and Twitter and Facebook. I'll show you those in just a second. The facilitating team, this is the information on the facilitating team, on the community chairs, and just in case we haven't given you enough information, these are actually the meeting notes from all the facilitating team meetings. So if you want to find out what we talked about, here it is. And finally, two other things. These were the presentations that were from the consultants that were the finalists to lead us down this path. And then this was a video that was released earlier, so all that information is there. And then, of course, the contact page where you will find all the simple links to all these resources. So PACT4SJSD.com is your central resource and the hub. One quick thing I want to show you, we will probably be improving the look and feel of the website over the next couple of months or so. So if you come back to the website and someday it looks like this or a picture similar to that, don't freak out. It's the same website, same information. We've just put it in a little bit more easier to use way, and you'll see that the drop down menus are there, and it's basically the same information. And one other quick thing I want to show you is the PACT Facebook page, which has all of the photos and all of the articles that have been reported on by the media, and pictures from all the CES sessions, and links to all the emails that we sent, and on and on and on. Okay? Thank you very much.
go to
Oh.
view show.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Down
and
here.
can
Pull that up.
go to slide 23.
I think it is.
Got it. Okay.
Our statements of recommendation and the facility master plan is based on findings from 3 basic sources: the community engagement sessions, the facility evaluation study, and the results of the community surveys. Dr. Rod Wright, president of Unicom ARC, is here to provide a brief summary of some of the key findings in the survey data. So I'll welcome Dr. Wright.
Thank you. Actually, what I'm really here to do is to run the clicker, but I get to do a little bit of the presentation also. I'm going to be talking about 2 surveys that we've done, kind of a very brief review of the survey that was done back in February that we did a fairly extensive report at the board meeting on. And then we're also going to be doing, we also just finished a tracking survey. I want to briefly cover that, and that was used to help fine-tune some of the recommendations that you're going to hear a little bit later. Let's first talk about the February survey. That was a 500 sample survey with a margin of 4.4, margin of error of 4 plus or minus 4.4% at the 95% confidence interval, and about 59 questions on it. We're not going to be covering all of them. I just wanted to remind you of some of the agree-disagree questions that were on there on this chart. If you'll remember, the first column is strongly agree. The second column is the combined agree. Investing money to improve our schools would benefit our community and our local economy. There's a strong connect in this community between schools and what it means for community that I think we can build on. The quality of schools, similar, kind of further emphasizing that point, the quality of public schools is the most important factor affecting my property values. Almost 2/3 agreed with that. Then I'm willing to support a tax increase to make sure we maintain a high quality of education in our school district. Right at 50% agreed with that. We asked people to evaluate a number of priorities for improving the schools, and interestingly enough, almost everything was ranked as a high priority by the respondents. These are the things that were listed most, are the highest on a pretty long list. And what they're ranked on is kind of the percent sevens, which was the highest priority. And then the 5s, 6s, and 7s are kind of on the priority end of that scale. As you can see, computers and technology ranked the highest on that, some safety and security issues behind that. Kind of the surprise on that list to me, and I think you'll remember me mentioning that, was early childhood education, which in a national sense tends to be rising as a priority where it didn't used to be maybe 10, 15 years ago. And also air conditioning, which 10 or 15 years ago never made a list like this, but now is tending to make all the lists in terms of what are priority improvements for a school district. A few more agree-disagree questions. The status quo is not good enough for our kids. We must make tough choices and do what is right to improve our schools. Virtually everybody agreed with that. The St. Joseph School District, this is a question about early childhood education, should make early childhood education available to more children, even if the state doesn't pay for it. 70% or almost 70% agreed with that. And then I would support larger schools as long as class sizes stayed the same. 71% agreed with that. If you remember from that survey, notions about larger schools and class size was gotten at in a number of different questions, and it varied a little bit about how people responded on how the question was worded, but kind of the key issue was keeping class sizes the same, at least in my view. A few more of those questions: improving our schools through the PACT program will improve the overall St. Joseph community. Nearly 7 in 10 agreed with that. The tracking survey showed continued support for the PACT recommendations and the PACT work. It is important that the district do everything possible to operate more efficiently, even if that means closing some elementary schools. 57% agreed with that. Again, that's another question about larger schools and closing inefficient schools and class size that we got at. And then some district elementary buildings are in such poor condition, it only makes sense to close these buildings and consolidate elementary schools into new or renovated buildings. 53% agreed with that. Again, you see, kind of depending upon how you got at the question, there were varying levels of response on those issues. In this survey, we asked people, and this is an important point, these questions were kind of at the tail end of the survey after people had answered about 15 minutes worth of questions about education. We kind of asked them in a generic question, there may be some kind of tax increase to support the PACT recommendations. How do you feel about that? In response, we got 49.8 saying they would favor that, 46.4% saying they would oppose it. But I want to emphasize this was towards the end of the survey, and probably that percent favor was bumped up a percent or 2 or 3 just by simply location in the questionnaire compared to having it very much up in front. We also asked people how they would feel about eliminating the portion of your levy that sunsets, and 54% of the respondents said that they would favor that, 40% opposed. Let me move on to the tracking survey. It is hot off the press, and we're still in the process of doing some crosstabs and things on that. A little bit smaller sample, but a very similar margin of error, plus or minus 4.9% at the 95% confidence interval. And let me just go straight to the questions that were most relevant to what we're talking about tonight. Very early in the survey, this was question 4, before people even knew what the survey was about, question 5 maybe. We asked people about a $90 million bond proposal to finance the facility improvements, including technology and safety, et cetera. In response, 44.4% said that they would favor that proposal, 46.4% said that they would oppose it. Clearly, we're 13% short of passing the GO bonds, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to kind of connect some dots between this facility proposal and what it will do for kids, what it will do for economic development, and also, I think, obviously, what it will do for community in this area. So I think there's work to be done to kind of get where this thing is fully understood. And again, I would again remind you that the facility plan is kind of hot off the press in a sense. Hasn't been a lot of time for the community to fully digest it and understand it in terms of some of the details, and I think that's work that we have ahead of us. We also asked a question about making permanent the portion of your levy that sunsets, and support for that was 57.6%. If you'll remember, that's higher than what it was in February, and I think this is getting to the point where, I mean, putting a referendum on the ballot is never anything that you should take for granted, but when you start getting into the 57% range, you're getting to the point where you have some level of comfort that unless something would blow up on the district or blow up during the campaign, this is getting to be a proposal that there's almost a consensus in the community behind in terms of passing. If you get a 60-40 vote, at least in my mind, that means you've got a consensus of opinion in the community. A couple of some disagree questions about here, and this table is different than the others. The agrees are the first columns, the disagrees are the second. People like me can't afford to pay higher property taxes no matter how good the cause. You know, I think that actually I said that wrong. These are, I've talked about this from paper today. This is strongly agree and somewhat agree, exactly the way they're on there. 62% agreed with that. That's down, if you remember, about 3% from the February survey, and it would be great long-term to see that trend downward a little bit more. Obviously, the economy that we're in now is a major problem in terms of people thinking about a proposal. Then I'm willing to support a tax increase to make sure we maintain a high quality of education in our school. That nudged up about 1% to 51%. We just need to drive that a little bit higher to pass, you know, certainly the bond proposal that we're talking about. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lois.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. PACT has developed 51 statements of recommendation. They are divided into 7 categories: early childhood education, preschool services, technology, finance, facilities, staffing, safety and security, additional considerations. The second tab in the notebook in front of you includes all of the statements in their entirety. For tonight's presentation, we're going to provide some key highlights or concepts from each one of those categories. It's very clear from our community engagement sessions and from the community survey that the district must figure out a way to address the needs of our children currently not receiving preschool education services. Providing services to these St. Joseph children will have a direct impact on their academic success in our schools and will improve the overall district rating in the area of student achievement. The district should conduct a thorough community assessment of these needs and proceed to seek funds, partners, and appropriate facilities to provide an expanded level of services to qualifying preschool children. This expanded level of service should include the utilization of certified staff to deliver this specialized curriculum in the most effective manner. It is no surprise that technology is one of our recommendation categories. Our statements highlight the need for ensuring equitable infrastructure and access to technology for all students. We think it is particularly important to recognize the value of human capital, providing appropriate staffing and ongoing training. Obviously, designated funding must be in place to support technology. In the area of finance, it is important that the district continue the effort to build trust with the community. The district should do everything possible to increase efficiencies, especially in the area of facilities. Long-term planning requires long-term financial stability, and PACT believes perhaps the most important step in the direction of long-term stability is to make the current sunset levy permanent. Most, if not all, of our recommendations for facilities are reflected in the draft facilities master plan. You will be hearing a full explanation of that draft plan as part of this report. Quality staff. Educational research clearly documents that this is the most important factor impacting student success and successful schools. In fact, despite our inadequate facilities and potential instability, our resources, our staff is performing at a very high level. But we do not want to become a training ground for staff to gain expertise at the St. Joseph School District and then be recruited to other school districts where they can enjoy better teaching, learning environments and a better salary. Our community recognizes this and has indicated that we must ensure staff salaries are competitive with our other districts. Our recommendation is that our staff salaries rank in the top 1/4 of our benchmark districts. Along with that, we must provide continued pertinent staff development programs and evaluate staff consistently to ensure accountability. Many of our recommendations in the category of safety, security, are being addressed in the facilities master plan. Examples include making provisions for safe student drop-off and pickup areas, and doing what most other districts have already done, reconfigure school entrances and make our schools more secure from intruders. Other items include better technology for our teachers to communicate with the office and parents. These statements suggest some immediate action to be considered by the Board of Education. Let me take the time to review the actual wording of these statements. First, following reception of PACT recommendations, the district should develop a plan for communicating those recommendations to the St. Joseph School District community and receiving additional input and feedback on those recommendations. Communication vehicles could include open houses, video, speakers bureau, all designed to get additional feedback from the community. Next, sustain the district's commitment to involving the community in a long-range planning by continuing the PACT Community Engagement Program. Periodically during implementation of the PACT Long-Range Plan, community members should come together under the PACT umbrella to evaluate progress, assess changing conditions in the district, and determine any changes or modifications to the plan. Beginning this summer, seek extensive community feedback and input on PACT Facility Improvement Plan. The PACT facility team will analyze the community feedback and will report findings to the Board of Education no later than January 13th, 2012. This report will include the recommendation regarding when, in 2012, referenda should be scheduled to implement PACT recommendations, particularly Phase 1 of the facilities master plan. Now, to provide details about the draft facilities master plan, we call on Mr. Sam Johnson, principal with BLDD Architects.
Thank you, Lois. Good evening. Todd Cerulik and I, Todd will be around passing a handout, are very excited to be here to present the facilities master plan that's evolved through the PACT planning process. Facilities master plan is really a roadmap to meet future facilities needs, future community needs. It's a guide toward arriving at a desired destination. Why is that important? Well, if you don't know where you want to go, any road will get you there. And what happens is you typically find out, I really don't like where I ended up, and we probably spent too much on the journey. Every community has things that they want to accomplish, and by beginning with the end in mind, they do a couple things. Number one, they guarantee that the money spent along the way is invested wisely. And number two, they ensure that they arrive at a desirable destination, at a desirable outcome. So as we put together and worked with the PACT committee to put together the facilities master plan, there were two outcomes that we thought this master plan should achieve. And they're shown there. We've shown the little logo E squared, but educational excellence and educational efficiency. If we can develop a plan that meets those two goals, those two overarching goals, we know that in your role as stewards of the public funds, you can say comfortably that you've accomplished your job and have been good stewards for community resources. Before we get into the details of the plan, I too would like to make sure that we recognize the folks that did the heavy lifting. Our local architects did the heavy lifting. We have Ron Oxshire here from Ellison Oxshire. We have Terry Clark and Greg Seifert from Creel Clark and Seifert. From River Bluff, we've got Joe Stock, Sarah Mark, and Doug Bowe. And they did the heavy lifting, as you heard earlier, during some of the worst weather I've ever seen facility assessments occur in. Dr. Franklin Hill was a huge asset to the team. As an educational planning expert, he wasn't able to be here tonight, but he helped us leaps and bounds with our planning and our outcomes. And finally, John Seamers with Unicom. John was the one person who went through every single building, making sure that our evaluation criteria was applied equitably. So thank you very much. And one last thanks to Charisse. I don't know which one of us created more stress, but I'm going to guess I'm in the top three. Thank you, Charisse. Well, those two objectives, educational excellence, educational efficiency. How do we know when we're getting there? How do we know we've reached those goals? We need measures for our evaluation. Educational adequacy is the measure of educational excellence. It's a process that we use to create an objective evaluation of how well a school building functions as a school. We want this to be objective and logical versus emotional and subjective. So we put together an evaluation tool. You heard a little bit about it earlier. It was developed by the Council of Educational Facility Planners International, a well-respected organization that writes the book on school design, essentially. We customized it slightly for St. Joseph School District, and that was what was used to determine how well our buildings score, how well they work as schools. It works. There are 6 different categories against which the school is reviewed. Each category has several questions. The questions have numerical scores, so you can add up the scores for each category, and then you sum the categories, and you come up with the overall score for that facility. Again, an objective measure of how well schools function. The Council of Educational Facility Planners International suggests that this is how you should see those scores. If a facility rated between 1 and 29, and by the way, none of the St. Joseph school districts fell in this category, is considered very inadequate. From my perspective, it ought to be condemned, get out of it immediately. If it was between 30 and 49, it was considered poor. It really doesn't meet your needs today. It has even less ability to meet tomorrow's needs. A school that is categorized as poor, and there were a few, should be replaced or should undergo considerable renovation, restoration, additions to be adequate so that it becomes satisfactory for today and tomorrow. Most of our schools fell in the borderline category, which means it meets some of the needs today. It's borderline in terms of its function as a school, but it becomes more challenged as you think about the future. And so schools that fall in this category should either consider being retired or undergo renovation, additions, alterations, so that they become satisfactory. Satisfactory schools are those which work well today, may need some modifications, renovations to work for the future, and then schools that are considered as excellent are good for the near future, next generation. That's the measure of how well a school performs from the educational adequacy comparison, the educational excellence component, that goal. What about educational efficiency? The measure for educational efficiency is life cycle costs. We want to understand the true cost of ownership, because as a school district, the only cost, once you construct a building, your costs aren't over. As a matter of fact, the life cycle costs have a far bigger implication than the initial construction costs. So there are two costs. There's the first cost of construction, the cost to build it, and then there's the operational costs, and we've projected them over a given lifespan, 30 years. Those include building renewal costs, maintenance costs, staffing change, any change in staffing if it's additional or if there's reduced staffing, energy costs. So if you've constructed a building that's got air conditioning, the air conditioning is included in that first cost, and the cost to pay for air conditioning over the next 30 years is included in that second cost. Once you've got the measure for educational excellence, being educational adequacy, and the life cycle cost, then you can develop a cost-benefit ratio. You can look at the ratio of the educational score to the overall cost and develop a comparison of which approach is a better return on your educational investment. This is where we are now, with one exception. The red line is the line that we used at our very first analysis to show what was the bottom of borderline. In other words, anything below that 50 is considered poor. So we showed that there are some facilities in the district that scored poor. The average of the scores throughout the district is 58. I need to mention that there's one facility up there that fell in the bottom quartile. We had 9 different comparative analysis, and Neely fell in the bottom quartile all 9 times. So it wasn't considered in the further development of our plan. A master plan, the plan to achieve educational excellence, needs to move the educational adequacy from an average of 58 up to a satisfactory range. So that was our goal. When we start a planning exercise, the sort of the baseline scenario that you look at is, what if we maintain the status quo? What if we simply maintained our building, but we didn't do anything for our educational programs? And that's what this scenario shows. This is the status quo. This is what it would look like if we didn't do anything other than continue to maintain them. We'd still have 23 buildings, about 1.4 million square feet under roof. Our life cycle cost projected over 30 years would be about $439 million, and our average educational adequacy would be 58.09. Now, looking at our goals, educational excellence and educational efficiency, clearly this doesn't meet the goal for educational excellence. As far as educational efficiency goes, you can't understand that till you have other scenarios to compare it to. So, because it doesn't meet one of those goals, we have to put together a plan that will. And so this is the beginning of the proposed facilities master plan. There are 2 components. The preschool is one component, and then the facilities master plan is another component. We see them as parallel plans. The reason there's 2 components, the preschool options require another variable. They need additional operating cost in order to implement these options, and that's why preschool has been kept as a separate path. Currently, you are meeting the needs for 300 preschool students. There is a need for about 900 preschool students. The limiting factor right now is operational funds. So when the district is able to be in a position to have additional operating funds. These are the options that we think make sense for the district to pursue. And as you can see at the bottom, the recommendation is really a combination of these options, whichever make sense at that particular instance. The first option is let's put our heads together, let's sit down at the table and figure out how we can make this happen. And that means partnering with other community agencies to provide certified preschool teachers. What that means is those community agencies would provide the venue. You're providing the certified preschool teacher. So that's one possible scenario. The district isn't in the business of trying to put other preschool programs out of business. They know there is an unmet need, and that's one of the options that can help them with this unmet need. The second option is to acquire additional existing structures. So in addition to the preschools that you currently operate, you would acquire additional structures to provide that additional programming. The third option is sort of a variation. Instead of acquiring additional structures, you could expand capacity at your existing facilities. And here's one example of what might help you serve up to 650. Let's say you considered designating 4 classrooms geographically at 4 facilities, existing facilities around the district. So perhaps 4 classrooms at a north side school, a midtown school, an east side school, and a south side school. What that would allow you to do is to provide 16 new classrooms, 4 of which, 1 at each facility, would be likely provided for child care that would be administered by an outside agency. The other 3 could provide for 15 students in the morning, 15 students in the afternoon, 30 per classroom, times 12 classrooms, that's an additional 360 students. So that's how we get to the 650, 660 students. So those are the thoughts about preschool and what seems to make sense. I think what will make sense will be determined by the specific instance that present themselves in the future. So on now to the proposed facilities master plan. And I have to say that it was remarkable to see the consensus arriving at this plan. With a district with this many variables, on the last CES meeting, there were 3 different options. 12 of the 13 groups selected this option. That's as strong a statement that this represents what the community thinks is the strongest option fairly well. So it starts by constructing 2 new elementary schools, K-5 at the Midtown site, and a K-5 at a new Northeast Elementary. We would retire the 4 facilities that create the greatest challenges to equity and educational program adequacy: Hall, Humboldt, Noyes, and Edison. And this is a good time for me to stop and talk a little bit about phasing. I know that the last project you went through, I think, was a 2000 bond issue, and you accomplished all that work in about 3 years. This would actually be quite a bit different. We are showing a plan that is 4 phases and would likely to take 18, 20 years for the complete implementation of this plan. Phases here are likely to range between 4 and 8 years, depending on the size of the plan. Phase 1 is the largest size here. It would probably take the longest. So in order for a facility to be retired, first, new facilities must be constructed, renovations must be complete, additions must be complete. So when the plan is adopted, you shouldn't expect an immediate change. Things have to happen like dominoes. So the new things must be constructed. So this implementation will be gradual and consistent over a much longer period of time. The renovation component of Phase 1 would start with Benton, Central, and Lafayette. Each of the high schools goes through comprehensive renovation, but in different phases. Benton goes through a comprehensive renovation in Phase 1. Central in Phase 2, Lafayette in Phase 3. So for Phase 1, the renovation at Central is for some athletic and physical ed components, as well as remodeling the auditorium and air conditioning the auditorium. The Phase 1 work for Lafayette is air conditioning the facility, as well as constructing new state-of-the-art biology labs. Hosea, Field, Coleman, Lindbergh, Pershing, and Skaith would go through triage and 10 work, planning principal work, security upgrades, and air conditioning work. And then Hosea, Field, Coleman, Pershing, and Skaith would all receive 6 classroom additions. I've got a video, an animation to show the work that's being planned. The new Midtown School would be constructed, and I hope this is not going to go too fast to make anyone seasick. And then the new Northeast Elementary School would be constructed. Hall would be retired, as would Humboldt. And the gray indicates that it's being retired. Noyes and Edison would be retired. You see the boxes are translucent. When they become opaque, like Benton, it means it's being renovated. Central undergoes a smaller renovation with the athletic and auditorium. Lafayette undergoes a renovation. Lindbergh undergoes a renovation, and the following schools are all renovated and then receive a 6th classroom addition. This would allow for redistribution of the student population. Field has a 6th classroom addition. Coleman is renovated with a 6th classroom addition. Pershing. And I believe this finishes out with Skaith, if I'm not mistaken. That's a first phase, $90 million worth of work. It would be the longest of all the phases. Phase 2 is much smaller, and I'll explain the rationale for that in a second, where nothing is built new and nothing is retired. As I mentioned earlier, Central undergoes its comprehensive renovation in Phase 2. Mark Twain and Parkway would get triage and 10 work, planning principle work, security upgrades, and air conditioning. Except for Parkway, it will already have been air conditioned. Lafayette and Benson get turf field upgrades. Central also gets that in this phase. Mark Twain would be expanded with a 6th classroom addition, as would Parkway. You can see it's a $45 million estimated in 2011 dollars plan for Phase 2, and here's how its animation looks. Central undergoes its comprehensive renovation. Lafayette undergoes a renovation of the turf field, as I mentioned, and same with Benton. When I say comprehensive renovations for the high schools, I mean wall reconfigurations, mechanical systems replacements, changing facilities so that they support a modern curriculum. And you can see Parkway and Twain just received renovation and 6 classroom additions. Phase 3, about the same size as Phase 2. Nothing is built new. Hyde is retired. Spring Garden is repurposed. Now, it's repurposed as the new Hyde. Lake is repurposed as a 6-8 middle school, as the pilot 6-8 middle school for the district. Now, with recent events, it's called to our attention that Lake may be in an elevation that would not necessarily be desirable as an eventual 6-8 middle school. So this is one of the components of the plan that warrants further vetting as you move into the next phase. Continuing on, Lafayette undergoes its comprehensive renovation in Phase 3. Spring Garden renovated to become the new Hyde. Ellison and Lake receive the triage and 10 work, planning principles, security upgrades, and air conditioning. And then Lake is expanded. Truman gets a gym addition so that it can host competitions on its own site, and Ellison has a 6 classroom addition, and this is what the animation looks like for that. Hyde is retired, and Spring Garden becomes the new Hyde. Lake is repurposed and has a significant addition to go from a K-5 school to a 6-8 middle school. Lafayette undergoes its comprehensive renovation. Ellison is renovated and has a 6 classroom addition. And finally, well, not finally, but Truman has the gymnasium addition, and that's the last component of that, of Phase 3. And Phase 4, this is the phase where the district goes from K-6 elementary, 7-8 junior high, to K-5 elementary, 6-8 middle school. So the new Northeast Middle School is built. Bodie is retired. Purpose is repicketed. Pickett is repurposed. Repurposed to become a 6-8 middle school. Rubidoux, Truman, and Pickett get renovations, and all three of those facilities are expanded to go from 7-8 facilities to 6-8 facilities. And here's the animation, final animation. So the new Northeast Middle School is constructed. Bodie is retired. Pickett is repurposed, and there is a renovation and addition to it. Rubidoux is renovated and receives an addition to go to a 6-8 middle school. Truman gets its last addition to accommodate the larger student enrollment. So to summarize, you've gone from, the plan goes from 16 K-6 elementaries to 12 to a fewer number of nicely sized schools, which allows you to see some significant operational savings. You go from 4 middle schools at 7-8 to 5 middle schools at 6-8. The high schools remain unchanged at 3 high schools at 9 through 12. And I mentioned that this change from 23 core curricular facilities to 20 results in significant operational efficiencies. But the other significant benefit is that this plan that you've put together allows you to go from here to provide every school to be within the satisfactory range. And that's what we mean by educational excellence. During the CES process, a couple of the meetings, we heard questions that said, why wouldn't the district just keep existing schools and make them better? And you know, that's a logical question to ask. It's sort of a middle road between the status quo option and the full-blown master plan that's been presented. And you would think that that would allow you, this should save some money. And it may in the first costs, but a closer look tells a different story. You would maintain 23 buildings. You wouldn't build anything new. You would just maintain your existing facilities. And if you're going to improve them, try and make them educationally equivalent to the master plan, then you're going to construct additions. Because you'll be working with older facilities that have some inherent inefficiencies, you'll actually build slightly more to maintain sort of the same capacity. Where the plan really falls apart is when you look at the life cycle costs, because you've added costs to the status quo plan, you've constructed more, but what you've really done is you haven't obtained a single dollar of operational efficiency. You've only added to the additional expense side of the category. So you see that the life cycle cost over 30 years is something like $140 million greater than the proposed facilities master plan cost. So while it might look like this plan might make more sense, might save some money, over any given lifespan, 30 years, it's going to actually cost you quite a bit more. Now that might be worth it if the overall educational outcome was something that was really remarkable, that created a great educational environment, but you can see that the average educational score doesn't go up as high as the proposed plan. So you are spending more and you are gaining less. And if you were to add Neely to this equation, your comparison would only be worse. So it turns out that of all the ideas that were generated, this is the weakest of the ideas. So here was the final comparison that was presented to the last CES meeting. Scenario A is the status quo, and I've run through that before. Scenario B and C show the same amount of work, just phased. B was phased in 3 phases. C was phased in 4 phases. The community came to a strong consensus that C was the strongest option, and I think for 2 very good reasons. Number 1, they felt that it allowed the district to accomplish more, affect more change sooner. And I think people are really interested in seeing, the participants were really interested in seeing that. And the second reason was, this plan was structured so that after the initial approval by voters, all subsequent plans could be implemented without an additional tax rate increase. That's a very popular plan with communities, and I think everyone felt that made this a strong decision. I want to take one last look, because we've shown you some large numbers, those life cycle costs, and I mentioned life cycle costs made up of 2 things, first costs and operating costs. The master plan that's being proposed is almost $230 million worth of new construction. as compared to just triage and 10 work, which is 27.5 essentially. So the master plan spends quite a bit more up front. But because of reduced operating costs, it actually has much, much lower operating costs, much, much lower. And that's the key to why this is effective. In fact, over time, in some time in the future, shortly after 30 years, these two plans will even out. They'll be about the same cost. And for every day thereafter, the facilities master plan that's being proposed will be less expensive because its operating costs are lower. And that's the key to the cost efficiency of this program. So, to conclude, the plan that's been put together creates educational excellence by creating 21st century learning environments, spaces that are designed for the educational program, special ed that's designed for special ed classrooms, art, music, science, technology, spaces which provide equitable learning environments across the district, in high-performance educational environments, meaning environments with the right humidity, the right temperature control, the right daylighting, the sorts of things that support the way students learn, and with lower student-teacher ratios. We've recalculated capacities for proper student-teacher ratios. They also provide educational excellence by incorporating the PACT recommendations, the recommendations that bubbled up through this process, recommended grade level configurations, facility sizes, and facility upgrades. They provide educational efficiency. This plan provides educational efficiency by balancing capacities with projected enrollments, by reducing the number of facilities to operate, heat, cool, and maintain, and by the corresponding reduction of resources needed to administer and staff those facilities, and through high-performance, energy-efficient building renovations. So they provide a great cost-benefit outcome by creating a great educational environment and reducing the overall operating cost. You can secure this community's educational future. And so when you circle back to the original goals of providing educational excellence and educational efficiency, we think this plan really stands up. And now I'd like to turn it over to Todd. Oh, I'm sorry. And you will. Thank you.
Now to provide the board with some key information about potential funding for the facilities master plan, we call on Mr. Todd Goffey with Piper Jaffray, the district's financial advisor.
Thank you, Stacy. Good evening. I promise we're almost coming to a close of the presentation, so we appreciate your patience. I do want to share with you a few options and some observations about the plan of finance. I mean, we've taken the process, we've taken the information that the architects have put together, and then we tried to determine how that would fit in to the models available for the school district to finance those projects. There are two primary types of financing methods for Missouri schools. One is the use of general obligation bonds. Many times we refer to that as a GO bond. And then the other option, which is used a little less, is the use of lease purchase financing, and that can take the form of either COPs or leasehold revenue bonds. With general obligation bonds, as I mentioned earlier, that far and away is the most widely used method of finance for Missouri schools. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the school district, and like your existing bonds that you have outstanding now, there's a debt levy that's established in your debt service fund that can be used for no other purpose than to repay principal and interest on GO bonds. Because it is a full faith and credit of the school district, it achieves a lower borrowing cost versus the lease purchase alternative. Dr. Wright mentioned earlier the voting majority requirements, and with GO bonds, depending upon the election date, is going to require either a 4/7, which is 57.14%, or a 2/3 majority of voter approval in order to get the bonds approved. We did provide just some sample election dates up there. The earliest one that would be available is November 8th of this year. You can see what the voting majority requirements are, and probably the easiest way to keep this in mind is that when we're in an odd numbered year like we are this year, the only 4/7 election date that's available is April. When we get to an even numbered year, April, August, and November all become a 4/7 majority election. In terms of filing dates, many of you probably know this, but for each of those election dates, the filing deadline is 10 Tuesdays prior to the election date. So if we wanted to pick, for instance, the April 3rd, 2012 election date, the filing deadline when that would have to be to the county would be at the end of at the end of January of 2012. I did mention the lease purchase option. Certainly it is an option. We did not spend a lot of time with PACT discussing this. We did do a little bit of analysis, but it's certainly more expensive than a general obligation bond. And under current market conditions, it's really about 0.5% higher in interest rate. Although technically the lease purchase does not require voter approval, in most instances, and certainly in this case, what would need to happen is the voters would still need to approve an increase in the operating levy in order to generate enough dollars to make the principal and interest payments. That operating levy can be approved at a simple majority as opposed to the bond issue that requires a supermajority. It's a little more complex legal structure to do that type of financing, and although it is an option, we really focused our efforts more on general obligation bonds. On debt capacity, under the Missouri Constitution, school districts are limited to issuing no more than 15% of their assessed value as debt capacity. From time to time, you'll hear the legislature talk about increasing that up to 20%, but that's probably a long ways from happening. If you take your assessed value of last year, nearly almost $1 billion, 15% of that is $150 million. You have about $20 million of bonds outstanding from 2 prior series of bonds. And so when you go through that calculation, you have about $130 million of bonding authority that you could go to the voters with in the upcoming year. That changes each year. Generally, when your assessed valuation goes up, so too will your debt capacity. But also, as you repay existing bonds and lower your balance that's outstanding, that will also drive that number up. Either scenario B or scenario C that Sam talked about, either of those scenarios can be completed with your bond capacity, both now as well as your projected capacity going forward. When we take the scenarios, and again, these numbers will match up with what Sam had discussed with the different phases, but you can see that this table shows under debt service levy the increase that would be needed in the corresponding year that would go on top of your existing 30-cent debt service levy. Scenario C, one of the benefits of that is it requires a single increase that would be associated with phase 1, and then the subsequent phases could all be completed on what we call a no tax increase basis. We would just simply keep the 97-cent levy, and that would just continue to roll forward. With scenario B, it's broken down into 3 phases, and there would be a levy adjustment that would be required with each of the 3 phases. Ultimately, scenario B would end up with about $1.16 as the total debt levy, as opposed to 97 cents for scenario C. We provided a tax increase table, and for the math whizzes, really all we do here, we take the home value times 19%, which is what residential real estate is assessed at in Missouri, and then that assessed value we take times the 49 cent, 67 cent, 86 cent, which is on a per $100 of assessed value. So on a $100,000 home, if you were to utilize scenario C, which is a 67 cent adjustment to the debt levy, that would be $127.30 a year of additional taxes that would be paid. To put another way, for what I would say for an investment of about $10 a month for owner of a $100,000 home, the plan of finance can be completed and the facilities and the improvements that Sam presented can become a reality for the St. Joseph School District. And finally, let me summarize just a few key highlights of the plan of finance. Your debt capacity is certainly adequate to fund all the facility improvements with general obligation bonds. The general obligation bonds will result in a lowest borrowing cost versus the other option of lease purchase. Issuing more bonds sooner is actually less expensive versus scenario B. And why that is, on scenario B, remember we were looking at an 86-cent increase to the debt levy, whereas with scenario C, we're only looking at a 67-cent increase. And so that's about a 28% difference if you wanted to go with scenario B. Repeating again, scenario C is about $10 a month investment for the owner of a $100,000 home. And we also like the fact that scenario C requires a single increase up front, and then all the later phases can be done with a no tax increase. What we've seen across the state over a number of years is that those districts that are able to get their debt levy at a position to where they can do subsequent issues with no tax increase have had great success across certainly the Kansas City area, but even throughout the whole state. Those school districts have been very successful with those bond issues. And there's really no reason why the St. Joseph School District can't be in that same position.
Thank you, Mr. Goffey. PACT sees these as next steps for the Board of Education. Number 1, thoroughly study the value of the PACT recommendations. Number 2, direct the administration and PACT leadership to develop and implement strategies and materials to take the PACT recommendations, particularly the facilities master plan, on the road this summer and fall. By that we mean the district should use every means possible to communicate the plan to the St. Joseph community for the purpose of receiving additional feedback and input from the community about the plan. We need to hear ideas that will help in further defining and refining Phase 1 of the facilities master plan. Number 3, charge the PACT facilitating team with the task of analyzing all the community feedback and input and bringing to you a report in January 2012 that summarizes those findings and provides further recommendations regarding a proposed referenda schedule for 2012. Again, we want to emphasize that this long-range plan should be considered a roadmap, a guide for the Board of Education to improve our schools and the St. Joseph community. We conclude our report by offering our sincere appreciation to the Board of Education for being supportive of the PACT program. We would like to thank Dr. Smith, the administration and staff, for providing time and expertise to help make this program successful. And finally, we want to thank the St. Joseph School District parents and community for their participation and engagement in the program. And we encourage community members to stay engaged to see the recommendations become a reality in St. Joseph. Thank you very much for your time.